It's news to me that it's news to you. To which degree, who answers to who? We could go on and on, but in the end, who are we kidding? My divinity is past infinity, am I getting through? That episode 8 was a doozy. But many questions are still left to be answered. Who? What? Why? When? Waffle fries. Yes, with episode 8 answering many long-running and strongly held questions, it feels like new ones just rose out of the ground to take their place. So, we have quite a finale ahead of us, which gives us perfect opportunity to revisit this pattern of characters, turn them into Pokémon, as well as theorize on what that ending may look like, who these characters may become, and maybe even more importantly, who they were. So without much further ado, let's hop right into today's video.
My, it appears a new human has entered this realm!
So let's get this show on the road with our master of ceremonies, our host with the most, that digital dictator himself, Kane. Funny enough, through all of the videos we've done, I never quite got around to drawing CNA's original artificial intelligence as a Pokemon. At least, not for a video. Maybe it was just not knowing enough about him, or maybe it was being that he's the ringleader, it just felt off-kilter to draw him as just another Pokemon. Or maybe, looking at him was like holding up a mirror to my own inadequacies in the creation of various characters in hopes that my audience would laugh, cry, or some unknown emotion in between. He really is just like me. Well, either way, we do learn a lot about Kane in episode 8, all the way from his birth to his eventual death. The episode starts with this empty black background and this singular circular object floating in its center. It makes me think of the concept of the singularity, what existed in the vast nothingness before the creation of, well, everything. It's what came before the Big Bang. The Big Bang being what created everything around us. And this little red circle feels like it's what came before everything else. We see this circle get filled with information through pictures and images and output these simple shapes, then complex shapes, then abstract shapes, before it's thrown into a prison for apparently non-positive AI. Something interesting that I find about this punishment is that he's thrown there because he's not doing his job right. When his job, as Kane puts it, is imagination. As Kinger puts it as well, he was developed to explore the idea of creativity. But the abstract shapes were not viewed as creative, just because they didn't fit the mold of what the developers wanted him to create. But in reality, isn't breaking out of that mold of what is requested of you a sign of creativity? It's an odd argument brought up there. The idea that it cannot create what it was intended to and is instead making something unimaginable is proof of lack of creativity. A theory, and there will be theories, so stay tuned, that I have is that the gloinks from the pilot episode and appearing minimally afterward are these simple shapes brought into digital life. They're his first creations. It's why they appear so simple and dim-witted. They're NPCs without the knowledge bank yet of how to truly create NPCs. The reason that I have for this is because when we look at the current NPCs, the wooden mannequins, they are uniform. They are simple, but complex in their development. They're what the developers probably wanted him to create, whereas the gloinks were simple, easy, and didn't fit any specific energy. These ones are mission accomplished. We see this original AI consume the newer version, wherein the red overtakes the blue, where many have assumed that the blue is Abel, consumed by Kane. This makes a ton of sense, as in the Bible context, Abel's sacrifices to God, or his creator, were seen as superior, whereas Cain's were good, but not as good as his brothers. In the end, Cain kills Abel and is cursed to wander the earth, scarred with a marking to signify his sin. In that way, life becomes the punishment. Using the other example of I have no mouth and I must scream, a story written by Harlan Ellison, there is a quote that bears heavy weight given this context.
Surrounded by madness, surrounded by hunger, surrounded by everything but death, I knew death was our only way out.
So if we look at the story of the amazing Digital Circus through this lens, then death does end up being the only true escape. Are the characters dead inside of this digital world? I mean, maybe. I mean, Kinger has been there since the 90s, presumably, but who would have been taking care of the body left back in the real world? You know, feeding it, medicating it. Maybe in death, Abel was the only one truly capable of escape. I just hope it's not the same for our digital crew. But for the design, I wanted to take inspiration from that ringleader type of energy. I see this Pokemon as a mythic at the very least, able to reshape reality and conjure worlds beyond comprehension. While I built the main frame to be small, I wanted to use aspects of the design to make a larger-than-life kind of feel. Generate this illusion that while the body is small, it makes a much larger silhouette to fill up space. I used the tail of the coat to exaggerate the length of the body, and the arms to balance this out width-wise. The teeth I turned into rings or halos, like those seen in biblically accurate angel depictions. You know, many eyes, many rings, many wheels, with the main phrase of be not afraid. I think this design balances out the wickedness with that fun-loving type of feel, but what do you think? So let's hear it for Kanon.
Kanon, the reality warping Pokemon. While this Pokemon holds tremendous power and is capable of reshaping reality on a whim, it was actually created by a team of talented scientists, seeking to improve on digital Pokemon like Porygon. It was bound to specific laws and rules, but upon entering into our world, those rules no longer applied, and it went rabid. Luckily, it was captured and placed into a digital realm where it resides simultaneously in paradise and prison.
For the shiny, I inverted the colors as a reference to the whole red and blue color scheme of the two AI. I've heard that Bubble is likely the second AI, Abel, but I think I disagree. It just feels too simple of an idea that lacks the type of twist that I'm hoping for from Gooseworks. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd love to find that Abel is just completely gone, and what's left to uncover is just what's left in the circus, which, after episode 8, ain't that much. By the way, this is actually my second iteration of Cain as a Pokemon. I said that I hadn't done any for videos, but I had done one that I just wasn't super happy with, and the vibe just felt like it wasn't working. I think it was a great design, I just couldn't pull my brain into believing that it actually felt like Cain as a Pokemon. So that design is now going to be available on the Patreon, dropping with this video for early access. You know, it's kind of funny. I did that other version, but never officially released it. I instead locked it away in a folder deep in my archives, until I built a better one. It feels like the story of Cain just keeps repeating itself, you know? I made a design, which I said looks great, is okay, works well to suffice Pokemon art, but doesn't fully satiate the creative endeavor that I was going for, so I threw it in a folder and put that folder within another folder and that folder within another until I'd made a better one. And now here we are, bringing it back to life. Well, I'm sure nothing bad will come of it, and I can just push it out of my mind completely.
Wait.
But speaking of pushing things out of our minds, next up we have Kinger, my favorite character from the very beginning. I knew he'd be useful, I just didn't know he'd be that useful.
I think I accidentally killed Kane.
Yeah, so we found out throughout the series so far that Kinger did in fact work for CNA, had a partner in the circus, witnessed the first abstraction, personally knew the prime developer of Kane, and oh yeah, had a hand in the actual creation of said evil AI. But in the beginning, he was just this kooky guy whom I fell in love with. This is my absolute favorite scene in the whole series, and it's so funny to think of who Kinger is now, looking back at this. He is shambling chaos, and I love him for it. So I made a first stage for him that captures his love of bugs as well as that goofy demeanor. I wanted this little grub to look something like a wooden pawn, and may have veered more heavily into the Squire type of route, but I do love him either way. Turn out that light, because here comes Ponder.
Ponder, the pawn Pokemon. These Pokemon don't seem very bright in the way of strategy, but what they lack in brains they make up for in survival instincts. It seems that their disposition often lands them in situations where they are able to survive what other Pokemon may not.
Now, I often ask you guys for abilities for the Pokemon in each video, but Oblivious just feels like a dead giveaway on this one. The rest, however, I'd love your input on, so let me know down in the comments what abilities all of today's Pokemon should have. I always love looking over those because you guys are just so much more creative on that front than I am. And going back to the design, I love the name Ponder because it gets to bring in not only pawn, like a chess piece, but also ponder, like to think. Like this next guy. I wanted to make our Kinger Pokemon a 3-stage bug type. Makes sense. He's the oldest living member of the main group as far as we know. I mean, he is the one who's been there the longest, but it's that oldest living part that I'm talking about specifically. Like I said, I have this assumption that some of, if not all of the group, are dead. Kinger likely went in after launch, which we know from coding scenes and context was likely the mid-90s. Pomni mentions that she put on a headset and that's what sent her in. Even Kinger seemed confused at the idea of an escape in episode 7, almost as if escape isn't something that could realistically happen for them. Putting all of that together, the idea that he went in the 90s, that he doesn't really fully believe that escape is something that can happen, and that the real thing keeping them in this world is just a headset. My theory is not that the group is dead, but that they were never fully alive. That they're digital copies of real living people. I mean, let me explain it this way. Say you put on the headset and in your reality, it doesn't do anything. You put it on, turn on the PC, and poof! Nothing happens. You take it off and go about your day, but in reality, it's scanning your brain, making a copy, one that believes it's you, and drops them into the circus. It seems wild, but let's look at Scratch, the creator of Kane. He had a brain tumor that was both allowing him to code in a way that made no sense to anyone else, thus making a hyper-advanced AI in Kane, but was also fully killing him. Robot from Invincible has a similar situation. He's in a constant state of pain and wants out, but knows that there's only a 50-50 chance that when he wakes up after a mental copying, that he will be the cured new version. I think that Scratch took that risk too, as well as anyone else who unwittingly put on the headset. When you close your eyes, you are the single version of yourself, but once your consciousness is split, you don't know which version of you is going to open your eyes. And in the case of the amazing Digital Circus, you don't know which one you were in the first place. Kinger becomes more lucid after entering the dark, like he's blocking out the stimuli of the digital world and re-entering that rebirthing state. So I wanted this middle cocoon stage to emulate that by looking like his pillow fort, but with eyes now a little more focused than the previous form, peering out through the cushions. So hand me that bucket because here's Shelter.
Shelter, the barricade Pokemon. Not much is known of this Pokemon as it tends to keep to itself. Rumor has it that while in this form, the Pokemon can unlock hidden knowledge of worlds beyond our own understanding.
The shiny keeps that woody exterior, and that patchwork was just so much fun to play with. I'd drawn Kinger as a Pokemon a few times, but I'd always gotten comments saying that he deserves a bunker style form or evolutionary stage. And after making this one, I couldn't agree more. I don't know how I ever got along thinking that we wouldn't turn his bunker itself into a Pokemon, because I love this as a Cocoon middle stage so much. So for my theory, if these are all copies of living people, then where does that leave us? What would an end for these characters realistically look like? Well, I think you'll be disappointed in hopefully the best way possible. I don't think that the ending for these characters necessarily needs to answer those questions of what comes next. Shows like Stranger Things tried to bring about everything by explaining the same plans over and over to give everything a finalizing line, only to then realize that we kind of preferred the open-ended mystery, and shoehorning in the "oh, but what if none of that was real?" just takes away from what little we got. I see the ending as the characters realizing that it is over, walking into the bright light together, and that's it. It's one final adventure, but one with no ringmaster, one that they're not being forced to go into, but one that they get to decide what it's gonna be. They get to decide how the story ends. Maybe they are all dead and can finally rest in deletion. Maybe they return to their bodies and how they were kept alive isn't addressed, because we want a happy ending. One where Gangle and Zubul can be together, where Jax finally gets a true, real-life friend that he can count on with Pomni. One where Ragatha gets to live a life that's her own instead of being under someone else's thumb. And Kinger, well, Kinger wouldn't have a happy ending. But maybe that's not what's best. You see, for me, the true happy ending is that everyone does get to go off into that great white light. Live a life somewhere else, or not. And that Kinger, realizing that Queenie and his old co-workers are all gone, still chooses to stay. Chooses to rewrite the Digital Circus the way that he wants, and finish the work that he and Scratch started in the beginning. He gets to build a paradise of peace where maybe he can be with Queenie, and they can chase bugs together into infinity. No malevolent gods, no vying for power or validation, just a perfect world that just so happens to not be real. And if I guess this right, I will eat my hat. I mean, one time with Vox's death as something that I was predicting and turned out to be 100% right is fine. That's an interesting circumstance that happens. But if I get this right 2 times in a row, I will eat my shirt. It's just a theory, but man, does it feel like one heck of one. Kinger grew into be the most competent and loving of characters. He's the dad of the group who truly wants to take care of everyone, and I think a part of him extends that same love and care to the circus, and maybe even in part to Kane, whether it be love or pity. So for the design, I wanted to harness that control and give us a bug that feels regal, but more so determined. It's a far reach from where we were with his design originally when I first worked on this challenge back in 2024, but I think it suits him now that we got to actually know him as a character, to give Kinger a chance to shine. So, ladies and gentlemen, Kinger.
Kinger, the regal Pokemon. While they can sometimes be absent-minded, these Pokemon are quite the leaders, and will bring any team of Pokemon together. Their 10 wings make them excellent flyers, while their flat abdomen allows them to stand strong on the ground.
The shiny is a reference to Queenie and shares her color scheme. I dig this design so much. I really think it captures the king vibe while still feeling determined and in control. Something I'm always glad to see happen with Kinger. It genuinely brings a tear to my eye when he gets to be his true self in the dark. While everyone else is kind of sequestered within the Digital Circus, he's sequestered within the Digital Circus and then within his own mind. So getting to free himself just a little bit makes me so happy. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. I was just getting myself a cool, refreshing glass of G Fuel Energy. It's a great drink that makes me feel like... And the best thing about it is right now, by using code STERN at checkout, you actually get 30% off of your purchase. Typically, this, or at least the, over here. The mix for it would cost you about $30, which is pretty dang affordable already. But by using my code, you can actually get a tub like this for $20. It's a great discount and something that really makes me feel every day like... So grab yourself some G Fuel and make sure to use code STERN at checkout. I have a link down in the description that you can use to get to the site quickly, easily, and safely. And of course, comedy does come in threes. But it feels like for every step in bringing Kinger to sanity, we take a step back for characters like Jax. From nearly abstracting and crashing out in episode 7 to his sudden realization and outburst in episode 8, his normally put together and abrasive exterior is beginning to peel away. And I don't mean that just figuratively. I was genuinely shocked to see him stand up to Kane with the rest during the distraction scene. And oh boy, did he get punished for it. Oh man, did he get punished for it. Speaking of those punishments, they do harken back to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, where Am begins torturing the crew in personal ways that hit each person individually. Up to this point, Kane was just creating adventures, and if there were mental breaks or abstractions, those were just the faults of the humans and their humanity not being able to handle the constant circus. But once he flipped himself into attack mode, it began to feel very much like Am from the story. For Jax, we got to see his fear of vulnerability. Once we stopped being distracted by the horrors of his skin being ripped off, great toy though, he's encircled by those closest to him. Pomni, Ribbit, and Kaufmo, all laughing at him, stripping him bare, making fun of him for being human with them. I don't mean just in a literal sense. I mean his guards could no longer stay up. His egocentric personality could no longer work as a protective shield. Jax pushes people away. That's easy to see, we all get that. But the reason suddenly becomes so much more clear. It's because when you let people in, they have the ability to hurt you so much more personally. And so Jax has been so very careful on who he pulls into his side. Maybe it was easier for him to attach to Pomni, since her very design harkens back to the friends he'd lost. Pomni shares the same eyes and blush as Ribbit, with a little of that same rounded head shape, while her costume, appearance of a jester, is so similar to Kaufmo. Yes, I know clowns and jesters are two different things. I read the comments on the first time I did this challenge, but there is an association there. She was literally designed to look like someone Jax would trust. Even Kane references in episode 8 that the bodies he built for them were to satisfy their inner workings of their mind. But I wonder if he means each person's body was built that way for their own individually, or if he built the bodies for the minds of all of them, creating characters that would cope and work well together to keep everyone mentally satisfied. Like Pomni's design was in part a reference to her in life, but is also in part able to allow Jax to keep from abstracting, giving him something familiar to attach to. My theory is that the phrase of "it's real" that he blurts out to himself is a realization not that the circus is real or that it's not all a dream. I think that he fully understands that this is reality, but that this time, unlike in episode 7, he also believes that this is a potential way out. He'd given up hope, and maybe that is what's kept him from abstracting. Because unlike Kinger, who closed up shop to protect his mind, Jax accepted it, and anyone who got close to him was just a reminder of the grim reality that he's in a cage. We see this when he stands up to Kane alongside the others, and the team is finally all on the same page about their goals. He realizes that this is real, that it's a possibility of escape. It's why he couldn't push the button before, because accepting that he was wrong, that the others were right, and that whatever world he'd go back to and was likely more horrid than the one that he was currently in. I think Jax has demons back home. I don't think that that's anything that anyone's arguing. I think the guy has demons back home, and the circus was kind of an escape from that, but the sudden realization that there could be escape without tricks, without gimmick, truly broke him. And I think we're gonna see some of the fallout of that in episode 9. So for the design, I went with something that felt very Trickster-esque and showcased a fighter type of build, despite me choosing to make him a normal type just for ability and attack usage. Jax is probably one I've designed more than any other. My first iteration was hyper simplified. My second was honestly a little overcomplicated, but this one feels just right. So put on your Sunday skin, because here's Jaxarab.
Jaxarab, the underhanded Pokemon. These Pokemon love to fight, but are well known for their underhanded tactics. Other Pokemon tend to steer clear of this one, if they're wanting a fair fight. Though these Pokemon can become good partners if trained properly.
Jax was a hard color scheme to translate, and he has been every single time trying to make him into a Pokemon. And his build is a bit wacky, so it comes down to the internal conversation. Is it wacky enough to already be considered a Pokemon body type, or is it not wacky enough and we need to expand on it in ways that it isn't already cartoonish? I also went with the shiny being the evil Jax, or good Jax. One of my favorite jokes of the series was that evil Jax is actually the good Jax, and I'm sure you understand. God, this next one gets me every time. When I first started watching The Amazing Digital Circus, I have to admit, I was not a fan of Gangle. I spent 2 full episodes that I was making these characters into Pokemon talking about how much I didn't like Gangle. She seemed whiny and more of a background character than anything. Then we went to Spudsies, and oh man, I realized that everything I disliked about Gangle, her constant self-loathing, her confusion on whether to smile or frown, and her reliance on a mask to seem cheery were all things that I didn't like about myself. In an instant, I realized that I didn't like Gangle because she reminded me too much of my own insecurities, and having that portrayed up on the big screen was scary, and I translated that fear into hatred for the character. You know, there's that mask that you put on to look cheery and happy, but it's a lot of work, and often is just to make those around you more comfortable. But when we got happy-go-lucky Gangle with that plastic mask, I found that I disliked her more, because while she was happier and smiling, it felt fake. It felt fake because I knew that feeling. So I'm glad that since then I've come to find a new appreciation for Gangle and see that she doesn't use the happy mask anymore. She's sad, but at least that's the real her. I was actually so lost on how to handle this design that I ended up drawing a weird dragon-like version of Gangle as a Pokemon for the first pass, and ended up completely tossing that one to the side and starting over. She's not this all-powerful creature who has put aside all of her challenges and comes out the victor over them. She's a kid who likes to draw anime characters and loves organization, and when there's a flow to follow, like working in fast food customer service, and I understand that. So I designed her as this springy type of body that can swap between the 2 faces as needed, leaving that weird dragon version to the Patreon. That was the other struggle. Gangle isn't a body or physical object, but the lack of one. So coming up with a shape for the design was near impossible, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Genuinely. No mask on that. So I'm actually pleased to present to you Ganglegaster.
Ganglegaster, the dual-faced Pokemon. It switches between its two expressions depending on the situation. One is excitable and ready to battle, while the other is more low-key and can hang back to examine the situation first. At first, researchers believed that this Pokémon had two minds, but later discovered that it was a single entity that merely moved between the two faces.
I went with a purple to better capture that ghostly typing, but kept red as an alternate color apart for the shiny. Which do you prefer, by the way? A design that is a step away from the original, but captures the feel of a Pokémon? Or one that is more close to the inspiration, but has some tendencies to lean away from the algorithm that builds what a Pokémon is? Let me know in the comments. Zooble. Zooble. This was a tough one. I feel like Zooble is both the most mystery of the characters as well as the least. They're comprised of parts as a reference to their kind of not knowing quite who they want to be and what kind of impact that they want to make in the real world, but also we've learned so much about who they are within the circus. Zooble saw through Kane's charade early on and avoided many adventures, which led me to wondering exactly what their role was going to be within the series, and it turns out that was their role all along. And while we never got a specific Zooble-centric episode, we learned a lot about the other characters through them. They got the better of Jax and were able to point out his flaws point blank, to the point that Jax really considered them kind of an enemy of the series. They established a relationship with Gangle that's sweet and really lets Gangle feel like there's someone on her team. And I mean, they caused Kane to break, which I honestly thought was going to be a much bigger part of the plan to overthrow him, breaking him face to face rather than using code. But I suppose there's still time. But instead, it just proved to us that Kane is permeable and capable of breaking down just like the rest. It proved that despite all of his artificial intelligence, Kane truly is kind of human at his core. Something that we never would have learned had Zooble been the type of character to just blindly go on adventures. So, for Zooble, I really went back and revisited my previous attempt at turning them into a Pokemon. I initially went with bringing together various other Pokemon parts, and I do still really like the idea. I just want to see about refining it more, swapping out pieces, bringing other ones in, and trying to find something that hits a balance of natural and unnatural. I feel like the first time I went in, I just kind of threw everything at the wall and figured out what stuck later. But now, having known this character a bit more and lived with this design for a while, there are definitely some improvements that I see that can be made. I think that's kind of where Zooble lives too. I never know if a design is perfect or good enough, and they usually aren't. I can always see areas I'd change, and even looking back at what I'd done 2 years ago brings up just a twinge of pain that I could have given you guys as the audience more, or I could have done better. I want to learn to be better at that, to be proud of what I've brought into the world, much like how Zooble has kind of learned to love themselves, despite not knowing which parts of their interchangeable body really fit. Learning to love themselves not despite these parts, but because of them. And I get it, there are parts of everyone that we wish that we could change, but learning to love yourself feels like a whole different game. They're living a life in the circus, making friends, working with others, and growing. I think Gangle put it best, that they've made an impact on her life. This show has made an impact on mine. And I hope that someday I can know who I am as much as Zooble knows who they are. So here's Zoomany.
Zoomany, the interchangeable Pokemon. This Pokemon is capable of changing portions of its body to resemble those of other Pokemon, both in look and functionality. This feat has allowed it to reach expanses never before seen, and meet Pokemon never recorded. There are some trainers off-put by the Pokemon's appearance, but those who take the chance to know them find lifelong allies.
I've applied the ability to swap between different stats for Zoomany, from the bulk form for heavy defense to the speed form for higher dexterity in battle, and the power form for straight up attacking. Maybe someday I'll make new forms to go with this ability. But in order to do that, I'm gonna need to know that you guys actually like this content. So if you haven't yet, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have nothing to say, then at least comment the name of your favorite character from the show. Maybe it's Disappearing Guy. Maybe it's Gummy Goo. It doesn't matter. I love all the characters, and if we had more time, we'd be venturing through the rest as well. But regardless of your choice, we all know who is just a disappointment. Or at least that's what Ragatha's mother would lead you to believe. Yeah, we've gotten to learn a lot about Ragatha's upbringing throughout the series. From an abusive mother who constantly held the idea of perfection over her head, to her unreasonable appreciation of horses. For those of you who haven't tuned into our weekly live streams, I often bring up how much that I despise horses. They are almost an animal. They are almost a person. They are more than anything a monster. Their bodies, their veins, their texture looks very human-ish from afar, but we are told that they are animals, and it's not right. I don't like it. I know that this sounds like the rambling of a crazy person, and it's because it is. But for Ragatha, these unholy abominations seem to be a form of comfort, as we learned in episode 6. But that is not all that we learned from Ragatha. A small catch-and-you'll-miss-it little line really informed me about where I think we're going with this, and helped to solidify my theory. In episode 8, we learned that she was not alone when she entered the circus. Having appeared as the first of our current round of Freaks and Sideshow characters outside of King, she calls for help. "Guys," she yells out as she pops into frame, which continues on my theory that these characters are mere digital copies of who they were in the real world. I mean, imagine your friend puts on a headset and is instantly comatose, or is sucked into the headset itself, or falls under a digital trance. Wouldn't you do something? Wouldn't you tell someone? Wouldn't whatever route you go down end with the server likely being disconnected and the entire circus imploding on itself from the inside out, whether that be by you calling the authorities and them coming in investigating CNA, or by you going through the building to find where she may be stored? Wouldn't this end with the end of the Digital Circus? And remember that of our current crew, she was in first, not counting Kinger, meaning that time had passed between each of them. So she likely went in at least a few days and at most a few years before the others. And no one is noticing that people who enter the CNA building abandoned, as referenced by Pomni, are just going missing? In the digital world, escape seems near impossible, but in the real world, it's just a long-running server with Kane's files housed and editable on the C drive. Unplug it and end the whole thing. But for some reason, no one has thought to. No one knows to, because these aren't survivors. They are copies with nothing waiting for them on the outside world. And I believe that Ragatha's line is the key component to this. Pomni went in alone, and the others we don't know for certain, but Ragatha went into CNA with other people who seemingly had no reason to report her missing. But for the design, I wanted to go with something different than what we'd done before. I focused on her as the new mother of the group, treating those around her with a kindness that she never got from her own mom. Thus, I gave her a classic shawl of puff and stuffing, as well as a round and flowing ball gown type of build, which, admittedly, I will say it because I know you're all thinking it already, plays on the internet's want for thick Ragatha, a want that was disproven by episode 7's beach episode. But we can all still dream, can't we? This is my circus, these are my monkeys, and we're making one of them thick. I think my neighbor heard me. So here's Ragdolla.
Ragdolla, the raggedy Pokémon. This Pokémon is known to care for those around it, often making bedding from its stuffing. While it does this to show kindness with each act of care that takes away from its own stuffing, it dwindles just a little smaller each time. Trainers have reported finding torn fabric in forests as a sign that this Pokemon finally gave all that it could.
I've reused and recycled names for these characters a few times. I mean, we've drawn each one at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 times, but this one I much prefer over Raggedy. From the first video, Raggedy was a play on Raggedy Ann. Ragdolla just feels like it has that air of regality to it. It just feels like there's more volume and more personality there. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. So this brings us to Pomni, or as her friends call her, Ixdidk. She's gone through quite the transformation over these 8 short episodes, and I've drawn her at least a Brazilian times. I mean, as a gift, Mrs. Stern actually framed several of my pieces from early on, and there she is, right beside my first channel logo, and under my script of the first episode of the Pokemon anime autographed by the series voice actors. Jealous. So when it came to redesigning her, I couldn't bring myself to do it. This design just means so much to me. It's one of the first of this channel. If you want to watch the whole process and my commentary from way back then I recently uploaded an omnibus of all of our Digital Circus' Pokemon videos compiled together, and who knows, maybe after episode 9 we'll visit this design again, and even better, maybe see what these Pokemon might look like as human trainers. So who is your favorite? Who are you adding onto the team? And did you like the old models better or the new iterations? Let me know down in the comments below. And hey, while you're down there, maybe consider stopping by the description where you can find various opportunities to support us, like joining the Discord. It doesn't feel like it does a lot, but it does a lot for me. We recently passed 2,000 members, and I'd love for you to be member number 3,000. To a lovely little group of people over there. We talk about everything under the sun, whether that be Five Nights at Freddy's, the amazing Digital Circus, Poppy Playtime, Transformers, and literally everything else. Or maybe you want to support us in other ways. Well, you can find our Patreon information down there too, where you can get access to high-resolution images or Photoshop files and access to videos early. Our YouTube members get a lot of the same stuff, including the videos dropped early and exclusive conversation. So I hope that I can see you there. But with all of that said, it sounds like you know where to find me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Yo, he's the Sterninator, commission terminator, it's beautiful work. I'm choked up like Darth Vader. If you hating on my man, you not a smart hater. He'll draw anything from Digital Circus to Arc Raiders. Poppy's Playtime, Bendy and the Ink Machine, Five Nights at Freddy's Shoot. He drew the whole team. His blends of Pokemon with loads of franchises. If you listening to this, guess you know where to find him.